What's going on, Maximal Beings? Doc Mok here with MaximalBeing.com. And I'm fresh off vacation, finally got a haircut, and I'm ready to break down why wheat is not the devil. Go ahead and hit the thumbs up down below, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you haven't checked it out, RN Graham has left you a special treat about really exciting fitness things coming this way to MaximalBeing.com. As you know, we're gonna always be bursting down that bro science and breaking down medicine into tangible ways that you can digest it as people that are part of our community. We're keeping everything positive here on MaximalBeing.com. So onward to this week's Journal Club. We have amber waves of grain, and everything that you eat that comes off of the shelf has some sort of gluten product in it. That's why it's so important for you to keep your life clean. What is gluten? It's not just wheat. It also includes things like barley and rye. And so a lot of people make the common misconception that gluten and wheat are the same thing. Yes, they are, but then that also encompasses some other grains. Did our ancestors eat grains? Well, it actually turns out that they have. There have been studies where they've evaluated the skeletal remains of different Neanderthal populations, and they found residues of different grains in their enamel. What does this mean? This means that our ancestors did in fact consume grains. And I am a proponent of the Paleolithic diet because I think it cleans up your life. But this is just one area where I think the science is yet to be fully discovered and may be a little gray. I'm sorry, paleo people. Is gluten the devil? I don't think it is. I think that we were meant to eat a diverse range of products. However, that said, we've kind of over time tainted our grains to be something mutant, something genetically altered that our bodies are incapable of recognizing as a true form of nutrition. As a result, we recognize these gluten proteins, our body forms an antigenic reaction, which is an allergic response, and will go and attack our bowels and attack our protein. A massive amount of cytokines or inflammatory markers surge, and you end up feeling gassy, bloated, you have pain, diarrhea. And that's not it. The scary thing about gluten and gluten products, if you have an issue or an intolerance to them, is that it can affect everything from your dental enamel to your blood counts to your liver function and everything in between. As a GI doc, we see one type of gluten intolerance, and this is called celiac disease. And this is a diagnosable, well-established condition. This condition's been around for centuries. It's more common amongst Caucasian people and rising in the Southeastern Asian population. And it can affect anywhere from as high to 1 out of every 200 to 1 out of every 400 people. And those figures obviously have a diversity between things. The clinical manifestations, again, can be any one of those symptoms, just low blood counts, elevated liver testing, dental problems, and then of course the classic cavalcade of GI symptoms. But how do we diagnose this condition? The first step is determining your ability for your mucous membranes to fight various invaders, and this is called immunoglobulin A. Immunoglobulin A is the first marker you want to check because about 15% of the population, roughly 1 out of 100 to 1 out of 1,000, depending on what studies you're reading, has no IgA. So that impedes their ability to fight off incoming infections. Why is that relevant? Well, the screening test for celiac disease is something called a TTG antibody, and this is an IgA. So if you don't have IgA, you're gonna have a negative test regardless of whether you have celiac disease or not. So it's important to know, is that a valid test to order? As it's probably the best first test to order. What is TTG? Well, tissue transglutaminase is a breakdown product of gluten that your body can mount an immune response to, and people with celiac disease tend to have this antibody when they're eating gluten. The next step in the workup, if you don't make IgA, is a different study called a DPG level, and that DPG level is immunoglobulin G. Now, the problem with immunoglobulin G is it's essentially your body's memory to certain common invaders. That can be infections, that's how you get immunity with vaccinations, or in this case, to gluten products. What does that mean? You've been exposed and you've had a reaction to gluten at some point in the past, but it doesn't mean that you're having a problem right now. So that test may not be quite as specific, meaning that you might not have the disease at this point in time. So that leads me to our next step, which is what I spend a lot of my time doing, which is endoscopy. That's where we use little flexible cameras. They go through your mouth while you're asleep. We're able to take little tiny microscopic biopsies, which you don't feel the same way as you feel biopsies on the outside. And then we can take that tissue out of the scope and look at it under the microscope. If you have a reaction that's seen in the small intestine, or even problems with the small intestine flattening, almost looking like somebody's mowed the lawn of your absorptive surface, that could mean you have celiac disease as well. The final test is an HLA antibody, and this is an antibody test that is very diagnostic. People with celiac disease have it. If you don't have these antibodies, you don't have celiac disease, period. The reason why I say all of this is because many of you may be looking for help, and your doctor may have even told you that you have celiac disease. But there's a lot of ways to misinterpret these results, and there are saliva tests, stool tests, and a bajillion blood tests that will lead you down the path towards a false diagnosis when you may not even have celiac disease. So know what you're getting yourself into, know the tests, know which one is positive, and know which ones to just ignore. That leads me to our next topic, which is non-celiac gluten sensitivity. This is a condition that's often made fun of by people, especially on social media, that these people are wimps, that they're just making it up, but I guarantee you that this is a true condition. There are a number of people, due to the reasons that we discussed, having these mutant grain strains that mount an immune reaction to gluten proteins. But the problem is that science hasn't caught up yet. There's not a diagnostic test that's well validated to study this. So how do we diagnose this? Well, the diagnosis is the same as the treatment, and that's get rid of the gluten. And that means completely. You need to scrub your home of gluten. Your whole family has to be gluten. Everybody has to be gluten. No gluten in your deodorant, your shampoo, your cleaning products. It hides everywhere. You've got to look for it, and you've got to get rid of it. One of my patients described going out to a restaurant when they have gluten intolerance and celiac disease as having unprotected sex, because you never know what's going on behind the scenes. A restaurant may tell you that they're gluten-free, and they may actually think that they are, but they could be cross-contaminating oils, using the same cooking surfaces, using the same dishes and pots and pans, and therefore there's gluten floating around that kitchen, and they're gonna feel terrible. Interesting anecdote, I had a patient that had terrible celiac disease, and she swore up and down to me that she was gluten-free in her diet, and I really believed her. And when we did a little bit of digging, we actually discovered that the gluten was hiding in her little furry companion's dog treats. And so her dog would come home, she'd take the dog for a walk, come home, give them a treat, and that dog would lick her face. And when we discovered that those dog treats had gluten, that was enough to send her into a gluten flare. So you can see how sensitive these conditions are and how real they are. Even in some people, they can cause lymphoma and a lot of terrible downstream effects. If you have any additional questions, head on over to our blog, maximalbeing.com/learn. The full article is there. We go through everything. We have a lot of good citations and research within this article. You can always shoot us an email at team@maximalbeing.com, or you can also leave us a voicemail speak pipe, and we'll be happy to answer your questions on air. Which leads me to our next point. I got a question this week about our last video on kombucha, and people ask me a lot on social media, what is the proper dose of kombucha to start with? Well, I recommend about 4 ounces for people to start for 2 reasons. Number one, there's something called the Herxheimer reaction, which is essentially when you're taking in good probiotics, the good bacteria and the bad bacteria fight, and they're trying to evict the bad bacteria out of their homes. The bad bacteria get pissed off, and they mount an inflammatory response, and some people can feel like they have flu-like symptoms, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, bloating, or diarrhea. It is self-limited. It gets better as the good bacteria take up those homes, the bad bacteria move out, but it can be really tough to get out, and it also can dissuade a lot of people from continuing on with drinking kombucha. Also, some people will just have a hard time with the carbonation, and I think the morning timing is best because your microbiome is starting to wake up. You're starting to wake up. Your guts are starting to move at that time due to your natural circadian rhythm. So 4 ounces in the morning is the way to go. So that about wraps it up, Maximal Beings. If you have any other questions, if you're having any gut health issues, please please just reach out to us on any of our social media platforms or shoot us an email as we discussed. The Kombucha Course is available, and if you sign up to our email list, you get a special coupon and a lot of other goodies in there. So until next time, Maximal Beings, this is Doc Mok, and I'm here on your pathway to wellness.